Hey guys, it's Christy and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I have an all new review of the new Natasha Denona Love Face Palette. So before we get into it, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel before you leave. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy, and let's get into it. All right, I am so excited for this video. So this again is the new Natasha Denona Love Face Palette. This unfortunately has not yet been released by Natasha herself. It's not yet available on her website or Sephora. I believe this was a mistake by Look Fantastic. They did release it on January 27th briefly on their website, and I did happen to pick it up quickly in that time. I did see a lot of people receive their palettes already. Mine took its time coming in, just going through Canada Customs, but it is what it is. I am super excited that I have this already. So again, this is the new Love Face Palette. This is going to be her Valentine's Day collection for 2023. I super loved her original face palette, and I will show you side by sides in a little bit, but let's talk about this one first. So this just comes in a really beautiful pinky purple kind of a package, and this palette is going to have an 18-month shelf life, and it is made in Italy, so pretty standard for Natasha. And this is the inner packaging, same color as the box, but super reflective. And the one thing that is different with this one as opposed to the original is it does have the little holes in the back, so you actually can pop these out and rearrange them or put them in different palettes if you so choose. So this is the inside of the palette. I think this is super beautiful. I personally love a good pink color story. So then we have a cream blush and a highlight. I am thinking the highlight's going to be too deep for me, but I can always get used out of it as an eyeshadow. So like I mentioned, I do have the original Glam Face Palette. I have mine in light. There is also a deep one, which I don't have, but this is light, and compared side by side, they're very similar in format, very different in color story. The highlight in the original is also a lot more suited to my skin tone, but the blush is a very neutral leaning blush. I really like it, except I will say it is a little bit on the dry side. So I'm hoping she kind of improved that with this one. So like I mentioned, I don't have a ton of details on this one yet because it hasn't even been released by Natasha herself. But let's get into putting this on the face, and then we're going to do some comparisons. So I'm going to start with Juliet, and this shade I'm just going to put in the crease. This one is just a matte. This is just one of her standard creamy matte shadows, and I'm almost wondering if I should have used a white base for this one. I just used my typical Milani eyeshadow primer and set that down with powder, but I'm wondering if this is almost like a pastel kind of a pink, if it's going to show up that well. This palette happened to launch the same day as the new Pat McGrath Love Collection and the Charlotte Tilbury matte blushes, so that was an expensive morning, but also very exciting. All right, and with the same brush, I'm going to go into Esme, and then I'm just going to use this one to deepen the crease in the outer corner. That is a very bright pink. That is very pigmented. All four of the matte shadows in here are creamy mattes, and then there is one foil. All right, moving into a smaller brush, I'm going to take the shade Echo, and this one I'm really just going to work on that outer corner. And I'm being a lot more careful with this one because Esme was a lot more pigmented than I expected. Oh, that's a pretty purple. This color story reminds me a little bit of the color story from the Mini Love palette, which we are going to take a look at, but I like this purple a bit more. I'm just going to grab my original crease brush, and I'm just going to use that to help blend that purple into the pinks. There's something about the tone of that purple shade that I am really loving. Purples are classically a shade that are kind of hard to formulate, but this is also something that I feel like Natasha has really mastered. I have never had to complain about a purple from her. And she's come out with quite a few at this point. The Love palette, the Mini Love, this one, and I've never had a complaint about a purple shadow from her. I also love that she did release another one of these face palettes because I feel like they were such a hit the first time around. Okay, so I'm not going to get to use Giddy today, but I can say that the mattes seem to be working perfectly fine. They're absolutely on par with all of her other matte shadows. And that purple, there's something about the tone of it that is just so pretty, and it was just very blendable, very easy to work with. This palette is almost giving me a bit of a Barbie kind of a vibe, which I love. So I'm really pleased with this, and I think her mattes in this palette are very strong, which is pretty typical, of course. Okay, now I'm going to take that foil shadow, which is Affinity, and I'm going to take that one all over the lid. It feels very smooth, actually. Hoping I won't get fallout. I do have my face done first for once. That is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful shade. Okay, why is that so pretty? Okay. All right, well, that is the pinky purple metallic shade of my dreams. Okay, I was not expecting to love that shade so much. I thought it was going to be, I know there are so many pinks and purples on the market, but this shade is beautiful. This shade is gorgeous. The sparkle I'm getting, the pinky purple hue to it, this shade is beautiful. Oh my goodness. I did get a tiny bit of fallout, but honestly, less than I expected. I just got tiny little glitters. I don't really care. That shade is beautiful. Okay, let's do the same thing on the other eye. That's beautiful. I'm just gonna blend a little bit. I got some of the glitters a little higher than I wanted. It's gonna blend to make everything a little bit more smooth. Again, this side, barely any fallout, just a little tiny bit of glitter particles, not much at all. I love the way even it looks over top of that purple. Normally I would grab another shade to kind of mesh them together, but I don't even need it. All right, let me pop off camera. I'm gonna pop on some mascara, and then I'll be right back to get into the blush and the highlight, and then talk about our comparisons. All right, I am absolutely loving this eye makeup so much. I think this is so pretty. It definitely gives a Valentine's vibe, but I would wear this anytime. I think this is so pretty. Let's go in to the cream blush. And one thing I like about this, I feel like this doesn't flop over as easy as the one in the original face palette. So let's go in. I'm just going to take a sponge. I'm just going to take a little bit off of my hand because these can be really pigmented. Oh, this is a very vibrant baby pink. Okay, it's pretty. It's pretty. It gives me some ideas for some more comparisons. Okay, it's almost reminding me of that Dior blush. Okay, again, taking some off the back of my hand. All right, so the blush is cute. Definitely a very, very baby pink. I do think it's a more unique shade for Natasha. I'm going in to the highlight now, and I'm just thinking this is going to be definitely too deep for my skin tone. I do think I'm gonna have a cast. So I'm just, with a very light hand, I will show you a swatch. Just even things out on both sides, but let me show you a quick swatch of that highlight. It's a very, it's pretty, but it definitely pulls a little bit champagne-y kind of gold for my skin tone. So I am going to take a little bit of it though. I'm just going to pop it on that inner corner. It is quite pretty as an inner corner highlight. So that is the completed makeup with this face palette. Let's look really quickly at some swatches. I will say to touch, the cream blush is very, very creamy, and in swatch it is very pretty. So this is a swatch of the cream blush. This is the highlight. They look very pretty together. The highlight is just a little too deep for my very fair skin, so if you are very fair like me, you may not love the highlight, but again, you can customize it. You can use it as an eyeshadow, you can use it on the inner corner, use it however you want. You don't absolutely have to use it for just for the cheekbones. Okay, so let's look at swatches of the full palette. So this is the cream blush, the highlight, then we have the shade Esme right here, which is just a really pretty fuchsia. Then we have Juliet, which is a pretty baby pink. It's quite pastel. Then we have Echo, which is like a dark eggplant purple, but it was so pretty, so easy to work with. It blended super easily. I'm so impressed. The shade Affinity is the shimmer that I have all over my eyes, and I love it. I love the sparkle. It's got pink, it's got purple, but there's just something special about that shade, and I'm absolutely loving it. Then we've got Giddy, which is almost like a peachy type shade. I think it's very pretty as well. And the whole palette together looks very beautiful. Juliet looks a lot like the cream blush. So let's talk about comparison. But the first thing I wanted to look at was a swatch of the blush, because this blush shade reminded me so much of the viral Dior Rosy Glow blush, as well as the Too Faced Candy Clouds blush. And I've swatched them side by side. So we have the Natasha Denona right here. We have the Too Faced here, and we have the Dior down here. So very, very similar. It's going to give you a very similar effect. So if you're really into that, then you may really enjoy this blush. Let's look at the palettes that I pulled. So of course, the very first palette that came to mind was the Mini Love palette. And this one wasn't as similar as I thought. So I will say those purples ended up looking quite similar. And then the pinks, I couldn't get an exact dupe. And the first shimmer on the palette was the closest I could get, but they're definitely not the same at all. So that one wasn't as similar as I thought. I also pulled out the original Natasha Love palette, and these weren't nearly as similar as I thought. So I thought the shades Valentine and Juliet would be a lot more similar than they are. And they are quite similar, but again, not the same. The tones are slightly different. Juliet is a slight bit more pastel. It looks a slight bit more, I don't want to say chalky, but that's the word that comes to mind. The dark purple, I was able to kind of find a match for the shimmer. In the photo, it looks like I did. I used the shade Giving from the Love palette. They're not identical by any means. The shade in the new palette is still quite unique, so I could not fully dupe that one either. So definitely more different than I thought. I do think you can get a similar sort of vibe. I just think the shimmer is going to be harder to replicate. Otherwise, similar, but different. And the palette I found that had the closest dupe is not from Natasha Denona, it is from Huda Beauty, and it is the Mercury Retrograde palette. So Mercury Retrograde obviously has a lot more range, but the purples and the pinks, I was not able to dupe Juliet, but I got really close for Esme, Echo, Giddy, and almost Affinity as well. This definitely had a very similar vibe. I do believe Mercury Retrograde has been discontinued, unfortunately, but if you have that one, you may be able to create some very similar looks. I wasn't able to dupe the shimmer, and I will say in the Huda palette, we have the shade Supermoon, which is like this white kind of shimmer, but when you sheer it out, you can definitely get a very, very similar effect. But I was really shocked at how close Mercury Retrograde was compared to some of the other Natasha palettes I had. Okay, let's talk about my final thoughts on this palette. The blush shade I think is beautiful, but it's not going to be for everyone. It's definitely very similar to that Dior blush, to the Too Faced. If you don't like those types of shades, then you're not probably going to want to go this way. And I think this might even be a bit more of a Barbie pink than those two, just a slight bit. The highlight I don't think is going to suit fair skin tones. I think it might work well on light to medium, but you can definitely use it as an eyeshadow or an inner corner shade. It does not have to be for your cheekbones. The eyeshadows I think are stunning. The mattes are up to par with every other matte in her lineup. They're so good. They blend so well. That purple is so well formulated. I didn't have any issues with the purple at all. Everything in here just blended so well. I did have trouble getting much pigment out of Juliet, but again, it is a pastel, and I think it's excellent for a pastel shadow. And the shade Affinity is obviously such a favorite of mine. I love it. I think it's so pretty. I think it gives such a really pretty, almost ethereal effect to the eyes, which I am such a fan of. So I love this. I'm very excited to have this one in my collection. I know these pink shades are not for everybody, but if you are like me and you love a good pinky palette, you love those pinks and purples and a mix of both and you just love that, then I don't think you'll have any regrets on this. But if you do have Mercury retrograde, I would challenge you to pull it out because I think you could get a very similar vibe and maybe you don't need this. And maybe if you have that palette and say the Dior blush, maybe you don't need this at all. So that's what I would say about that. Do I think it's an excellent palette, and if you want it, grab it? Absolutely. I totally do. But if you're looking for alternatives, that is what I would suggest. However, I love this. I am so excited that I have it, especially that I have it so early. I am so excited about that. For those of you who missed out on the, I guess, Look Fantastic glitch, I'm sure it is coming so soon. And I think I also forgot to mention this does retail for $74.60 US, which is completely random that was also on Look Fantastic. So I'm not sure what it's actually going to be on the website or Sephora, but I will of course share the link and let you know as soon as this is widely available. But that is it for me today. Let me know down below if you're planning to pick this one up or maybe you already did. I love hearing from you guys so much. Thank you so very much for watching. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go. I do upload at least 3 new videos every single week. It seems like a lot more lately. I've been heavy into the reviews, but that is it for me today. Thank you again so very much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!
Oh